So here are a selection of Venetian subjects for you to try painting. There's an oil painting I've done on the previous occasion, which is quite busy with buildings. Maybe we'll do something like that in due course, but my idea today is to do something simpler. I've got various other photographs I'll send you so you can choose, but the subject matter I like here is with the gondola and the view across the Grand Canal here. If I move this painting, you can see I have got another view looking across from a slightly different angle, but the lighting is more attractive here, particularly on the buildings across the lagoon. So I'm going to use the lighting from this photograph and then the foreground from this photograph. Slightly different angles again, so I'm going to use the height of the gondola here, the eye level in this one. So a combination of the two. So you can follow that, or you can do them as they are if you prefer. There's another lovely view here when you approach the Grand Canal from the ferry. You can see here with the cathedral and the view and entrance into the Grand Canal through here. That's another one you might like, and again, lots of busy buildings in that. And so my idea for this project was perhaps keep the buildings a bit simpler. If they're in the distance, we don't have to worry about all the details of the buildings in the same way. And if you want to have a bit more information on gondolas, I've got a lovely close-up here, which I'll also send you, with the detail in the gondola, in the gondola, and so on. So some good source photographs to help you decide. But let's get cracking on the composition. So I'm going to start off by doing a sketch here. So whichever medium you're going to paint in, you can follow the sketch, then you can decide whether to go watercolour, acrylic, oil, or even pastel. I'm going to zoom in on this. There we go. And so now let's get cracking. Just pencil on paper. So if we look at the subject here, we can decide whether to have more of the lagoon or more of the sky. But I think because of the height of the buildings here, I'm going to just bring the lagoon down a little bit, or the edge of a little bit below halfway. Is it a third? It's probably just above a third. I'm going to go up a bit higher than a third, because what I want to do is give myself space for the foreground. I think the actual subject of the gondola is going to be worth. I can't draw a straight line up at that angle, so I'm just going to angle my pad down. So that's where I'm going to put the top of the water. So let's just pan it out now. There are actually two gondolas here, and whether you put two in or simplify it's up to you. I haven't decided yet. I'll decide as I sketch it out. But let's just start with the shapes of the buildings, and we'll divide that up. So I'm going to take the angle, as I say, we've got in this photograph, but when it comes to painting, use the lighting from the second one. So we've got a low I'm just going to treat the building as simple rectangles. So more or less, what am I painting? Slightly bigger than an A4 photograph on this pad. It's actually a block, so that we got to paint on it without any curling paper. So I'm just going to break it down into sort of squares and rectangles, and whether you count windows or not is entirely up to you. But I think the other thing you can do in something like this is, if you pretend it's, say, early in the morning when there's a little bit of a mist, you don't even have to do any windows. You could do it as just if like a silhouette. So we come across this little gap here. I'm going to bring it over to about here. It's important to get relatively the height of the buildings to the width, but actually this changes at every angle, and you only got to compare your photographs to see that by being at a slightly more oblique angle in this photograph to these buildings than that, you'll notice that the facade, for instance, on the right is more foreshortened than the other one. So if you change it slightly, nobody will know. Nobody will know. And then we've got a little canal opening up here, and some smaller buildings going off there. So just simple shapes. Where do we put the tower? Here we go. So we come in here, and this I will just measure the height of it relative to its width. So if we take the width of the tower, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to the top. So whatever width you make the tower, make it 5 times as high. 3, 4, 5. So up to, here we go. That's the top of it. and that's including the spire. Just simple triangles, rectangles, and I'll talk perspective as we do it, but actually the perspective in this is very, very subtle because we're at a distance across the lagoon from the buildings. You'll find that any little angles are very subtle, so don't go crazy by tipping shapes up and down all over the shot, unless you want to be a cubist, and of course there's some very fine cubists amongst my followers, so that would allow you to do anything you like with the shapes. So we're actually seeing the side of the tower on the right here, and that's where we're going to exploit the sunlight from the second photograph. It just will illuminate the subject matter, make it more visually appealing. We've got sort of facades with, tympanums and columns and all the rest of it. I think the most important shape is just to get this particular skyline shape right. And that's the tricky thing. I'm just working like if I'm going slightly bigger. Yeah, I'm going up about 20% on the composition here, so I might lose. That might end up with me losing something of the buildings on the right once I've got these to scale here. So again, relative to the height of the tower, the next thing I do is just take the height of that tower and count it across. And from the right edge of the tower, if you can see where my pencil is, I'm taking the height. I might just move the camera up so you can see what I'm doing. Look, I'm taking the height of the tower like that, and from the right of the tower, that actually gets me to the end of the building. So if I go the whole height of the tower on my paper, which I'm now doing, is there, but pretty much the length of my pencil. So I come across, and that gets me over to here for the white marble facade. And in terms of height, it's about 2 widths. We were 5 widths up, so it's about 2 widths to get to the top of the roof here. So that's where that comes. So you don't have to be pin sharp on this, but you want to just get the right proportions, or the right feel for the proportions, so that it looks convincing. Then what we do have is a very fractional angle on this building, because this corner of the building is actually slightly, so let me just show you, this corner is slightly closer to us than on the left. That gives us well, I mean, in terms of angle, it is so subtle, it could really be done as a horizontal. And so when we get to the tympanum, what happens is underneath here, it drops down by a fraction. So on my drawing, on my scale, I suppose that the right side of this line is 1 or 2 millimeters lower than the left side of it. That's what you're going to, it's very, very critical. And we've got the width of the thing and a little triangular shape on top. Now, if you're concerned about getting these shapes right, what you can do is actually lie your pencil along your source angle and get the angle and transfer it onto your drawing, okay? So whatever angle you check up here, you can put down here. And you can actually bring the photograph here, fold the paper over. Let me show you. If you take the photograph, you can actually fold it up to where you need to check an angle. Put it right next to it. And then you can take the angles through from like this, there, this angle here, and get it absolutely spot on. So the only angles you're getting here are on the gables and the ends of the roof shapes. So that is a simple technique to guarantee accuracy. So there we go. We've got our little angles in place. We've got the ridge of our roof coming over. And then we've got the dome, and then we've got these two little, what do we call them? I know the word for them, I just can't think of them at the minute. Anyway, the two little, whether they're belfries or whatever, I'm not sure. But there you come in there, and then we've got a similar space to dump to there. So that gives us where our dome is. Now the dome is a bit tricky because we're looking up at it. So don't be tempted to make the bottom of the dome very curved. It is fractionally curved. I mean, it is so subtle here. So you can almost do it just as a straight line. If you're doing this as a silhouette, you don't need to worry about that because it will all merge into one. But it's pretty much a semicircle dome, as opposed to, onion shaped and other such things, which actually these little ones are. So pretty much straightforward. And again, just want to get the proportions right for the rest of the building. And if you can draw it fairly loosely, fairly free, like I'm trying to do, it will probably look absolutely fine. Now, just thinking ahead, this is the sort of subject that if you like buildings, you could pick out these details once you've done your painting. You could pick them out in pen, for example, would work really well. So you could just do pretty much flat washes through all the sections of the building and then just draw in some windows and details into the columns and all the rest of it with a pen. That would work beautifully. Anyway, there we go, there's our shape here, and then we've got the other two little, well, I was going to say if it was an Islamic cathedral there'd be minarets, wouldn't they? But they're not there. Campanile, that's what it is, the bell tower campanile. Thank you. My head got there in the end. Same root as campanology, bells and all that. So there we go. So just drawing these, the left one is fractionally higher than the right one because it's fractionally closer. So that's in perspective. You don't have to know lots of complicated rules. Just got to work on the basis. How close is it? If it's closer to you, if it's twice as close, it's twice as big. If it's twice as far away, it's twice as small. Okay. So very simple maths. So picking up those details, and again I can pick out details in here when I come to paint. What you might want to do is, if you're very fussy, you might want to, not that fussy, if you're very particular, if you want detail, you might want to mask out some of the tiny details. But basically, because I'm going to use the right photograph, the whitest parts of the building in the sunlight, I'm going to use, I might mask out when it comes to painting. I might not. I might just advise you to mask out and not do it. I might not follow my own advice. I hate masking fluid, but sometimes it does get us where we need to be in terms of capturing and preserving details. So this is just bringing out the outline of the building, so I'm going to move that little gap across a little bit, because as I've expanded slightly on scale, I'm going to lose a bit of the buildings on the right. So to get the proportions of this, the red brick building here comes in, hang on, halfway down here we've got a little side buttress coming out, and then we get the building here coming across. Actually, that side buttress, I've got it too low. It's very easy to get this wrong when you're just rushing through it. I'll tidy that up in a minute. And then we come over to about, I'm moving over about here for the ends of the buildings. Now, make a confession, this isn't my photograph, this is my daughter's photograph. When I went to Venice, I didn't take so many photographs of the buildings. I was really painting people in the shops, people in the cafes, people in the streets. And this is a long time ago, so my daughter took this photograph and the others, but she took them with me in mind. Wasn't that good of her? So when she went, I said, take some good photographs. I want lots of buildings, views across the canals, and she obliged me with lots of lovely photographs. So Luciana, thank you for your contribution to this lesson. And in fact, Luciana might even paint it herself when I send her the lesson, and we can see how she does from her own photographs. So there we go, we've got the basic shapes there. That means we just move this little gap, or there's nearly a gap through from the buildings across the tree. So just trying to get the rubber. So let's adjustment, slight adjustment, and then there's a little adjustment in there too, bit of a tidy up. So I think we've got the basic shapes, picking up the tops of these little tree shapes, which give an interesting contrast to the regular shapes of the buildings. So we've plotted it, we've planned it. Now the trick is to, could just put in some details here, but the trick is to decide the scale of our gondolier, and that's really, in fact we've got two gondoliers, so they were they're so in front of each other it's quite difficult to pick them out. But so pretty much central in the photograph, I think what we can do is just play with that. We've got the end, and we could make it bigger. If you're a bit closer to the gondoliers, they'll seem bigger than if you're further away. So actually, again, the scale of the gondoliers isn't that critical. What is critical is to get the height of the heads on the eye level here, basically standing on the quay side, where the same height as he is, and that's our eye level. So if we imagine a gondolier where, or two in a minute, here's, let's have a gondola here. Now when it comes to drawing a gondola, little tip, it's a subtle shape, the sort of curve of a gondola. Let's not worry too much about the stern and the prow. The prow, by the way, has the fancy carved decorative piece on it. There's probably a special word for that, I'm sure there is. I don't know it. If you do, let me know. Comments appreciated. But let's just look at the whole shape. So it's a sort of banana shape, but it's a very low banana shape. So let's just try and get the shape on the waterline first. And I'm just going to go get them down a bit. So there's a slight angle, and that gives it interest. So if I'm going to go from there to there, I think I'm going to, if I'm going to do both of the gondolas, and one seems to be longer than the other, I think I might move the figures apart from each other. If I'm going to do one gondola, I think as long as I come out as far as this gap with the end of the gondola, I might move the stern across a tiny bit. So it's just a judgment call. So, yeah, so that's where the end of it's going to come for this one. And you'll notice actually when they're in the gondola that the hull actually slightly lifts clear of the water. It's just almost clear of the water. So we've got from here to here, straight line, then it lifts up a fraction, and then it swoops up. So we want to put a nice big angle in here for the stern. We won't go into the detail in a second, and then we just want to work up the depth through the gondola. And the width of the gondola, so I'm going to just draw another line, almost going into the middle of the boat, just draw the three almost parallel lines, just in the middle bit, and then we can add our curves. Before we do that, I'm going to look at the angle into what I would call the cockpit. That's totally the wrong word, of course. So we've got an angle down here, and we've got an angle here that's not quite so steep, roughly there. So now I can draw, and I'm bringing my hand right round so you can see, let the zoom in so you can see. So now I can draw the sort of curvy shape, so just swinging my hand this way, stern goes right up there and swoops down. So a nice strong curve there, okay? Which goes right up into the top there. Going to the back of the boat, we can echo that curve with a slightly less curvy curve, like that. There are shapes within that, we'll come to those in a moment. And then as it comes down underneath here, we don't see the end of this hull until we get to this curve, and then it comes in, so it's like that. So there's a very sharp shape here. I don't think I've turned the end up enough, so I'm going to now do that. Correct that. Yes, it comes up at a slightly higher angle here. So that's the front of it, that's the back of it. So slight adjustment, and again trial and error. It's a great technique, but just go for it. See if the shape turns out okay, and if it doesn't, do what I've done. So I've just sort of given it an extra bit of a curve, and then rubbed it back, and on we go. So that got that end a bit nice, and then we've got our figure. This figure is going to actually stand in sort of here, and in fact, as he's pushing off, I quite like the figure in front who's at an angle himself, bending over. So we'll have his head a bit lower down there. That's where he's going to go, and then we come over here from the inside of the boat. We come through, and then we come. It's a shallower curve. I'm just going to draw the curve up to the figurehead. It would be on a naval vessel, wouldn't it? I don't know what it's called on a gondola. And then, so it's a flatter curve than we've done on the other end. There we go. And now we can curve up and come into our decorative feature, which has like sort of like a row of teeth almost. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Are they all the same? No, it's 6. So yeah, so 6 teeth on both of them. So I don't think they're all the same actually, but these two seem to be. So we've got teeth coming down to here, and that curves into the. Finally, just as you come down to beneath the teeth, it curves into the base of the vessel. So we've got one gondola. We've got the seats in here. These seats seem to be covered over. We've got figures in the second one, so it might be. I think I'm going to leave it as one gondola. I'm going to take the figures, a couple of figures from here. You can have 4 in a gondola or 2. I think 2 might be sufficient. So let's just draw the shape of the seats. They're at an angle, like these angles. Just getting a feel for the angles makes a huge difference. And we've got the seats. Let's put a figure in here that the heads come up to about here. So you can put whatever you like in this. You can put yourself in it. Excuse me. You can put your favourite person in it. Whoever that might be. And then you can really make it fun. Because if it's not big enough, you could even have a bit of a portrait going on in there. So, and now we've got a bit of rippling water down underneath the hull. But I think having that at a slight angle, it really makes the composition more interesting. And then we've got, it might be useful, I think, what I'm going to do is put the pole that he rests on, this little sort of like a bull's horn that comes out of the side of the oh, by the way, there's a height to this. I said I'd come back to that. There's a sort of little inner shape which comes up to about here. So let's just draw that first. One scope up there, and it's like a sort of triangular, and then it scoops down into that curve onto the top. So that's a sort of higher stern. And then out of the side of that, you get this little, what I would call a bull's horn shape, and that's what he rests his pole on. But that means we can now put the pole in place. That'd be the correct, and we can check the angle of that against the photograph if we like. So that comes in here, goes up quite high, in line with his elbow, and goes down into the water. And the one you'll see a second pole, obviously, and that's from the figure behind, so we can eliminate that to simplify it. That means I've got to put his head a bit further over. So I'm now looking, I'm using the pole as a means of positioning my head. Let's clean that up so you can see. And we're almost ready to paint, guys. Just get this out. Oh, the other thing is, by the way, I say almost, there are lots and lots of mooring poles and stakes in the photographs. My idea is probably just to have 2 or 3. Maybe have a couple on here, or one on this end and a couple on the other end. So left and right of the gondola. Okay, so I won't forget them. But again, let's simplify to make it more attractive. And so I'm just looking at the pole and the guy's waist, which comes in here, and his torso is at an angle. Let's just draw it at an angle like so, and then make sure you've left enough depth for the leg. So 1 foot there, and then there's a slight gap, other leg. And they're both has a bit of an angle going off to the right, going from the feet, they go up slightly to the right. And then we've got his arm up here, raised up, and his elbow and arm they were in line exactly with the angle of the pole, so his hand coming in here. So that's very, very crude. I might tidy that up with I've done it in a 2B so it shows up for you, so I might rub that back a little bit before I paint it. So now we've got the head up here, is looking down, they're looking out. We've got everything in place, so let's just zoom out and put some poles in. And what's quite nice in the poles, if you look at your photographs, is if you can have the pole hitting the water, basically there'll be a bit of reflection beneath the pole. So rather than have the pole go off the bottom, what I'm going to do is bring the poles in, so about here, and they're stakes really, so some are high, some are low, so you can have them. One's going to go in there, and I'm going to take a couple from the other side, and again have them so that although in the photograph some of them go off the bottom of the photograph, I think I'm going to just include ones which, or one of them won't and one of them will. How about that? That's a nice compromise. So let's just do one over here, and just draw them as quickly and as fluidly as you can. And that will have a reflection going straight down, and then I got another one slightly higher and coming down slightly lower, or maybe come even further, but that's up to you. You can decide. And I'm going to put, there's another short one in. I'm going to put another short one in just behind this one. A slightly different angle. There we go. So I've got all the poles in place. Let's move it back, zoom in a little bit, so you can see. So we're now ready for painting, guys. If you want to put in a few more windows and so on, you can. Maybe I'll add a few before I do the painting, but just the basic ones, just to map it out. So thank you for watching. Come and watch the next video to see how to paint.